Hey everyone, and welcome to An Operator's Blog. In this episode, we will be discussing GTM strategies and learnings for US-India B2B SaaS startups. Joining me for this episode today is Satya Ganni. Satya is an extremely experienced SaaS founder and operator. He has built and sold 5 companies over the last 2 decades almost, also led the acquisition of 2. He's currently the CEO of Beamer. Beamer is building a cutting-edge product-led growth toolkit for SaaS and digital-first companies. And they also recently acquired Userflow to strengthen the business. I have known Satya personally for more than a decade now, and I've really seen him as someone who's a pure builder in the SaaS space, who has really learned how to build SaaS businesses by putting in the hard yards, in the trenches. And I personally enjoyed a lot of conversations with him over the years. So really excited to have you, Satya, today for this conversation.
Yeah, super excited to be here, Soumitra. Thanks for inviting me, and I think this podcast has been long due, and I really look forward to to our conversation.
Let's get right down to it. So to kick off, Satya, walk us through your journey.
Yeah. No, it's almost coming up to a 2 decade mark, especially in the States and operating cross border. And it also makes me reflect a lot. I think there has been some success, lot of failures, lot of learnings there. But I think came to States almost in 2005 for grad school. Decided to be a founder. A funny part is that neither in my family or anyone is anywhere close to entrepreneurship. I don't know why, but I think the bug bit me, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be on my own," and started to build tools. So I was a mechanical engineer, but self-taught programming myself. I would not call myself a rock star coder or anything, but I think I still can build and prototype stuff. So that's helped a little bit. So build the first company, and by the time I finished grad school, fortunately, that got acquired for a pretty decent deal. And then I said, "Oh, this is phenomenal." I was new to this country, having known nobody, and then here I am. 3-4 years later, being able to sell something and make an outcome, and then I felt really liberated. I really felt liberated that okay, then I don't have to work for anyone. Be on my own. I think that high of the first company success kind of was super interesting because the second company was such a big disaster, which we will talk about. So the high that I had at 24, and by 28, I was like, depressed and and down. I think that's what markets teach you. Is they kind of put you where you belong. So I'm a firm believer of, hey, the markets will eventually put everyone where they belong. So it's been a fun ride. As I said, lots of success, lots of failures, but I think having that openness to keep trying, I think what kept me going. So far exciting, I would say.
Yeah, personally, I think one of the big things I've learned, as more of a bystander and a friend from your journey, is just the pure value of persistence. And I think you are someone who's the classic kind of grounds up founder story, and which is what kind of I tell all founders that look, I think the only thing you can index on is sort of grit, right? Which is not giving up, having many shots at the goal, and sort of keep trying. Everything else is either you learn it or you hire for it. But this is something that the founder has to bring to the table.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cannot agree more.
Perfect. So, Satya, I think to really get maximum value out of all your experience over 2 decades, what I'm thinking is, I want to go basically through every stage of a classic US-India SaaS startups life cycle, right? And at least as a US-India venture investor, the challenges I see founders dealing with in each of those stages, and really see what has been your experience, across all the 5 companies that you have done, and even like as you are kind of now growing Beamer. So does that sound like a good framework?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So let's start with the 0 to 1, which I think both of us as founders can say that I think this ends up becoming the most fondest stage that you look back on. Um, the first thing that I see really US India founders struggling with is finding design partners in the US, right? So sort of classic example, somebody a very smart kid in India kind of thinks of an idea, puts something out there, starts resonating, maybe gets, a few users, few early customers in India, but, they kind of know that, look, US is the ultimate market. The guy has no networks, never studied here, kind of probably has a B1, B2 visa, is planning to sort of come here and test the market out. How do you go about very, very tactically finding design partners in the US?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's not a easy challenge, especially if they haven't school here or if they haven't spent their formal career here, right? I would say the best place to start is probably alumni networks, right? And don't think about alumni networks just as schools that you went to or where you studied. I think they are also workplaces, right? Like for example, let's say you were a developer at Intuit and you left Intuit to start your own company. I'm sure Intuit has 90,000 employees and probably, maybe 40 folks or 50 folks, right? Through your workplace. So that's like a big network in itself, right? So I would definitely start with LM networks as a first touch point, right? And thanks to the social channels like WhatsApp, etc. Now you can be reach out to anyone. So alum is the one thing. Second thing is if you have some clarity around your ICP, right? Around your ICP, oh, this is the person. Most ICPs in today's world have certain communities, right? Whether they are Slack communities or whether they are, social forums or LinkedIn groups. I think they have communities. So that's the second place you would want to dig your well, right? Like, and all. I think the third thing I would suggest is events. I think the challenge with US is, geographically we are so vast that it's very hard to be in one place and try to find design partners, right? So the best thing I would strongly recommend anyone coming is go to events, right? Go to events. So, for example, if your ICP is salespeople, then go to GTM related events that focus on sales or selling, etc. Right? So that's the third pillar, and the fourth is doing thought leadership on social media. Right? So sometimes what happens is you have to be out there to do thought leadership and share your perspectives. Right? That's what social media is for. Share your perspectives. Somebody might see it and might send you a message, and even in larger corporations, there's always the innovators that are always looking at, hey, what can I champion, right? What can I champion? So yeah, I would start with alum networks, ICP communities, events, and then thought leadership.
Yeah, and I think the point of alum networks is so strong. I think even in my own case, I mean, as an investor, right, I get a lot of DMs, cold DMs on LinkedIn. If it is someone who has, ideally, if it's from one of my undergrad or business schools, but even if there is a remote connection with one of the companies I've worked for in the past, or somebody who even had some connection with the portfolio company of one of my erstwhile funds that I used to work for, almost my kind of response rate is 100%. Like I almost take every meeting, right, where there is a common connection. So I think people kind of undervalue even the value of soft overlaps and how that can lead to much better conversions, even if you're reaching out to people cold.
Exactly, exactly. Absolutely agree there. I think both school and workplace and even certain founder communities, whether like for example we have SaaS Boomi as a community. I'm sure a large percentage of them are in the US,
Yeah.
and you can reach out and ask for help. I think you should not shy away from doing that. At the same time, there are communities like Panda, etc., which are probably for Indian American SaaS founders. So all of these are places that I would go and seek a help.
And especially Satya on the event side, I kind of see a lot of founders who end up landing, even at later stages of their startups, end up landing in the US, buy a ticket, but really struggle with even mining some of these events, right? I mean, a lot of these events are huge. I mean, you come to a Dreamforce, it's pretty much, it takes over entire San Francisco. You have after parties, you have so much going on. What are some of the things that founders can do, especially people who are kind of new to the US coming in from India, to really mine these events properly? Like, how do they get like a booth, or do they kind of just mill around? Do they go to after parties? Like, I want to get very tactical around this. Like, what are some of the things that work well?
Yeah, yeah. No, I would not look at sponsorship this is your first time attending an event. I would
Yep.
just as a participant, right?
Yep.
I think one of the things that would helpfully is, you can ask in the communities that you are present that, hey, has anyone attended a Dreamforce before, or have anyone attended SAP conference before, etc. Right? I'm sure somebody have attended and probably they will share a perspective, especially if they have been a multi-year attendee, right? So I would say, yeah, one, no sponsorship, but then, second, ask for feedback about who have done it in the past. Like recently, somebody have asked me about SaaStr, and I said, no, it's absolute waste of time. Don't go there, right? I was very clear in my answer, and he did ask why, and I shared my own reasons. Now he can make an informed choice. All right. So I would, yeah, probably asking the past attendees, joining as a single attendee. And sometimes I think you should not also shy away from writing to the event organizer. Like I have done this myself in the past, where I wrote to the event organizer, this is my first time. I might sponsor in the future. I just don't want to spend $2,000 for a ticket. Can you discount? Or can you let me in? So they did let me in, which worked out okay. So sometimes you just ask, and
That golden rule of life, always ask, that always keeps coming back to create value. No, this is great. These are, very helpful. I think going to kind of the second thing that I see a lot of US India 0 to 1 stage founders struggle with is really scoping out MVPs, right? I think this whole topic, I mean, there's so much of content around it, YC, lean startup, last 10, 15 years. I mean, you have seen kind of the whole landing page idea, get waitlists, put some hacky tools out there, put it on Reddit, Hacker News. I think one thing that I'm now seeing is that I think people are kind of learning that there is a lot of clutter now in the market in every use case, especially in SaaS compared to 5, 7, 10 years back. And second is that there is, because of that, there's too much of cognitive overload and demand on, even your users' time, right? So I think the whole concept of how to think about what's that V1, that itself needs to evolve, right? So what have been some of your learnings across, all the companies that you've been part of, and how should a founder think about scoping out what's that first MVP, right, that they should be putting out?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the interesting part about that question is what do you want to achieve out of the MVP, right? Is
Yeah,
that validation of the idea, or is it the ability for someone to use it and pay for it, right?
yeah,
I think the first line of thought is, hey, what are you trying to achieve, right? I think if you are expecting someone to pay for it, that's not likely to happen with an MVP, right? It has
yeah.
to be minimum sellable product, or I think even Girish from Freshworks, he would call it FFSP or something like that, which means fully featured sellable product as a framework, right? So I would say the first thing is what are you trying to achieve, right? If it is purely validation, I think then putting up some code mocks is definitely okay, whether
Yeah.
it is like or something. But if it is actually something you would want to sell and make money, then I think you have to go further along because the bar has moved higher, right? I think it also is a function of the market segment you're going after, right? Like, for example, are you going after enterprise, mid-market, or SMB customers, right? Like enterprise customers, what is the point in creating a small MVP, etc. They will not appreciate that. I think two things are very important. One is the market segment that you're going after. Is it enterprise, mid-market, or SMB? Second is the category of software. Like, for example, I don't see any value in creating an MVP for a security software because people will not be able to use or give a tangible feedback. I always suggest people to move away from MVP to an MSP, even if it is little more engineering intensive, to get to a product where people can try hands on and appreciate it enough that they will be willing to pay for it, even if it is a paid pilot or a trial account, etc. Right? So I think that viableness should lend itself to this minimum sellable product, where people can try their hands on, especially the end users, and have the confidence that this, I'm ready to pay for something, right? Even if it's a paid pilot. So but keeping in contours about those two things, one is the market segment that you're going. Second is the category of software. Is it security, something else? So both are important, I would say.
And in fact, I was chatting with a founder yesterday, and there's a sort of a common trap, right, where this whole MVP to MSP journey, you can get kind of stuck on the MVP loop, right? And sometimes it's kind of just a fear, especially as a first-time founder, of, hey, can I ask somebody to like pay for this, or vice versa, you maybe sometimes don't have resources to get to the MSP. Like to your point, right? If you are trying to solve a cybersecurity problem for a large enterprise, unfortunately, you have to build out a stack, right? I mean, they even for them to use it. I mean, leave alone prod to for the team to even play around with it, right? There'll be a certain set of features that be required, right? So it's a very and even I mean, in my own kind of career, both as an operator, founder, as well as now an investor, I've just it's very hard. It's a lot of it is an art, right? You have to kind of discover it. I think you need to have some broad guiding principles of. I think to your point, what are my goals at each stage, and how do you keep moving ahead? How do you keep pushing the product forward on the spectrum?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think the feedback loops will be very, very important because if you are trying to validate your ICP, if you're trying to validate the market segment, if you're trying to get more feedback and data about what you're trying to do, I think being clear about the goals matter a lot.
No, great. This is awesome. So now moving forward, right? Let's go to the, I call it the 10K to 100K ARR stage, right? So in this stage, I think, a common challenge that founders face with that you're still kind of trying to hustle. You're still not at PMF clearly. But there's something which is resonating, right? So you're kind of trying to run various experiments, and typically you get in a lot of B2B SaaS companies all kinds of personas coming to you, right? So sometimes it's a very large company which is also interested in it. At the same time, you're getting long tail as well now, and there are obviously conventional wisdoms like Clayton Christensen. It's always kind of bottoms up, innovator's dilemma. So you start from the bottom of the market and then you go up market. But there are certain cases in which actually it makes complete sense to do a large enterprise, right? But then that requires building the company in a different way, capitalizing the company in a different way. So there is this whole dilemma of at some point you have to almost do that trade-off. Hey, do I go enterprise or do I go mid-market or do I go like small, long tail kind of a thing? And in certain cases it is obvious, but in a lot of cases it's actually fuzzy, right? It's actually a decision that you have to take, right? So it's a strategy decision, right? In a way. So any frameworks, any mental models that you feel that founders can kind of use at that stage?
Yeah, yeah. I think in that stage, my biggest preference would be for qualitative feedback, right?
Hmm.
Like emphasizing going deeper on the qualitative feedback loops from customers or prospects. I think that's the most important thing, right? The more you get qualitative feedback, and I would probably go wide enough to talk to a wide range of people, right? Whether they are customers, partners, competitors, industry experts, even operators who are using other tools, right? If somebody is a end user using Workday and few other HR tech tools, right? So they will have a perspective, right? Everyone will have a perspective. So I think the qualitative feedback loops are the most important thing. But if you have honed in a certain ICP, right, and you're trying to do, I think understanding that early signals of push versus pull is something I think you need to have that mental model, right? Like for example, let's say you pitch to 10, do you get a sense of is this still looking like a push or is this looking like a pull? Because from an end user or an ICP, you will see some form of an excitement, right? Either some form of an excitement to say, oh yeah, the problem is interesting, or the product is interesting, or we would like to try out. So those are all pull signals, right? Those are all pull signals versus that you don't see any response, you don't see any excitement, you don't see a response for your next level follow up, right? For me, those are early signals that there's no excitement, right? There's no excitement, etc. There's only so much you can push, right? I would say this phase is mostly spent to learn and learn faster. That is where I would also recommend going to some events or conferences, etc., that matter to your ICP or to the problem industry that you're trying to solve. So qualitative feedback loops. Having some signaling around push versus pull. Third is the ability to spend as much time to learn faster. I think you're trying to move certain knobs in the scene, and your goal should always be to learn faster, right? I think I would not look at any numbers. I would not look at let it take its own phase and time, but I would only look say, am I learning? Am I learning?
No, that's super interesting. And what do you think, Satya, about like one of the things I look for a lot, and this is kind of more as an investor, is kind of also a founder market fit, right? Which is there are some of these calls that, of course, I mean, there is a pull or a push, but then there is also that whole vector of, hey, what is your competitive advantage, right? Like I see some founders who are really good at content, social media, right? Like there are some people who are already kind of evangelists in developer communities, like 10,000 people kind of follow them, they know them, right? There's a
Exactly.
natural competitive advantage for them. Whereas I see some people stepping out of large enterprise software companies where they know how to do or they've executed like 250K ACV deals,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I think that is also kind of one vector which also becomes important, which is it's more actually a self-awareness
Mm.
kind of a situation as well, where you're trying to figure out that what is your and your team's DNA as well.
Yes. 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 No, I think the founder market fit is very, very important. But at the same time, I would not completely over-index
Yeah.
on that dimension completely, right? Yes, it gives you an unfair advantage in certain domains and areas. But I think the broader thing is there are so many problems that are worth solving, and if you have an open mind and if you have an open eye, yes, it's great that. I think a classic example I can give is the UI path founder, right? He started as a developer and built a company, but I don't think he knows what robotic process automation is or anything, right? So yes, it's good that if you have like a strong founder market fit, but at the same time you don't have to absolutely index because there are people from different domains coming and solving problems.
I think that's what Vinod Khosla says, right? That he actually doesn't like when there are kind of so-called domain experts trying to
Yes.
become founders in the same domain. He actually wants people from other domains because
Yeah.
they will kind of think about the same problem differently. Because if it was easy for a domain expert to solve it, that problem would have already been solved.
Yeah, yeah. I think a simple example is storage companies, right? Historically, in the Bay Area, there's so many successful storage companies, but they didn't invent Dropbox, right? Some
Yeah, true,
externally came and saw
true.
the problem and built a storage company on top of it. And there's so many examples of that. So yeah, I think founder market fit definitely helps, and it gives you an unfair advantage. But does it mean that somebody else should not look and solve the problems? I think there are certain problems that gives you a very, very deep unfair advantage in certain domains, etc. But if you're solving an application level problem, not an infrastructure level problem, then I don't think it matters a lot.
Great. No, this is super helpful. That's why I love having conversations with you. I think it's just so much of wealth of experience and viewpoints to piggyback on. Let's move ahead, right? So the next stage is the 100K ARR to a million ARR stage, right? So I want to run through a classic case that I see a lot, right? So this is a founder clearly has found some early adoption in the market, has typically raised a seed round, so has some capital, not a lot of capital, right? Still, expanding in the US. Typically, in this stage, you still have kind of a founder-led sales type of a model. You still have very limited resources, fairly small team, and you're trying to juggle through many things, right? So you're trying to you have limited runway because the seed rounds are typically small, and the cost of everything has gone up. You still don't have enough kind of team in the US on the ground, so it's basically you or some one of your other co-founders is doing it. Third, you're also trying to show growth because there is kind of your seed investors are telling you, look, for you to be able to raise the next round, it's not just enough to get to that million ARR, that
Yeah.
magic number. You have to go there fast,
Yes.
right? And so there are all these balls up in the air, right? So what are some of the, even mindsets, aspects, or kind of again sort of mental models that you see will be helpful, right? As founders are kind of really navigating these trade-offs, these ambiguities, right? And these pressures, frankly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think I would definitely start with finding one or two people that you can shoulder on first, right? That you can shoulder on who have gone through this phase in the last 24 months or last 48 months or 36 months. So if you can find one, two founders there, that's a great starting point, right? Especially in the segment that you are going after, whether it's enterprise or SMB. So I think finding someone and all, like for example, if a founder has gone through that enterprise segment in the last 36 months, being able to shoulder on. So I would definitely first find someone to shoulder on, right? Shoulder on so that you get that perspective. Second thing is, I think, setting expectations, right? As you know, most founders are fairly aggressive and everything, but I think you're also trying to kind of hit that trajectory from a threshold with so many unknown variables, right? There's no data, there's no absolute historical data. Like, how does your funnel convert? Nobody knows. Point of time and all. I think being cognizant and setting expectations at the table. Hey, I don't have a lot of historical data. We are throwing darts and multiple darts here and there. We hope that some of them will stick, and we will learn quickly about which darts are going to stick and double down on it. I think setting that expectations clearly across the board, whether it is with the team, whether it is with the investors, is helpful. Third thing is, I think having that financial discipline, because you still have a small seed round, you don't have a lot of runway. So setting that financial discipline instead of bloating the team to 40 people or 50 people, right? Just minimize your burn and see if you can be agile enough to do it, right? So yeah, having someone to lean on. Second is setting expectations. Third is running a lean org till you see that light at the end of the tunnel. I think all three will be important to have some sanity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love that whole point of sort of having those shoulders, those kind of they could be even peer mentors, right? These are people who are not, I mean, these are not kind of your logo brand name founders or people who have kind of built company over the last 20 years. These could be people who are basically like 24 to 36 months ahead in the
Yes.
journey as well, right? But I think just having that, because honestly, again, the challenge with this phase is that there are no playbooks, as you
Yes.
said, right? You don't know. There's no data. It's not that if some ex-founder in B2B SaaS in the CRM space did that, and if you are doing something in the marketing space, will that work for you? I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on market timing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go in a very established category of software and still see no excitement, or you can get into very, very early and also see no excitement, or you can be in an emerging space and do well. Like for example, a small example is last 2 years we see in this category of compliance, right? Whether it is around SOC 2 or something, and in many companies in that space did fairly well, right? Not because they're insanely great. Uh, or something. It's just that there is a stronger market pull. I think a lot really depends just on the sheer market velocity and dynamics, which a lot of that is beyond your control.
Hence the value of grit and of staying lean and giving yourself enough time and runway. Perfect. No, this is awesome. Let's move to the next stage, right? Which is the 1 to 5 million ARR stage, right? So in this case, again, classic example. Obviously, clearly the product is resonating in the market. The ICP is fairly clear. The founder has kind of spent 24 months, 36 months in the US, getting the company to the stage, right? So a lot of the things have been built out. Probably they've also raised a round, right? Maybe it's like a larger seed round or even like a Series A round. So there's capital, and now the
Mhm.
founder kind of feels that, look, I think this now's the time to kind of augment the team in the US. Maybe get like some help on the sales leadership side, head of sales, VP of sales, whatever you call it. The issue again is that, look, the founder is still fairly new in the US, right? And I mean, it is a competitive market. I mean, there are so many companies out there with capital, and now you're trying to hire people. A lot of times in US India startups, the brand is still not established, right? So there is still pull from the market, but the at large employee base doesn't necessarily know you, right? So in that case, how should founders go about like hiring, building the first team out in the US?
Yeah. No, no, great question again. I think I would start with your investors, right? See, most of your investors, either they are in the cross-border zone,
Yeah.
right? Cross zone, and don't think about just their investors, but also think about the LP limited partners of those investors, because some of them might come from US, right? And hopefully they are individuals with some individuals, right? So yeah, I would say probably start off with referrals from fellow founders, fellow CEOs or investors. That's a great starting point, right? Saying that, hey, I'm looking to hire this head of sales. Can I talk to two, three people in your network, who has been a sales leader, successful sales leader, so that I can get some insight. I can get some insight, right? So I think, start with asking referrals, right? Asking referrals. That's one bucket. Second thing is there is so many individual recruiting leads who specialize in sales hiring. So we just hired a VP of sales and customer success, and I used an independent recruiter. Her name is Brittany Lawlin, based in Boston, worked at successful companies like Pandadoc, Drift. So she was instrumental. She was a freelancer, and she volunteered to help us, right? So I think, yeah, you being able to identify specialized recruiting leads in specific areas, like there are people who specialize in sales hiring, there are people who specialize in marketing hiring, there are people who specialize in engineering hiring. I think identifying those recruiting leads, or even some talent agencies, right? I think a smart founder, if you're able to talk to 4 or 5 agencies, I'm sure he's able to connect some dots, right? So third thing, which might sound counterintuitive, is the hiring really required? So I think that's an interesting point, because I tell, hey, if you're targeting the enterprise segment, or upper mid market, it makes a lot of sense to look at having a sales team. But if you are in the lower mid market or SMB, does it make sense to have a US based sales team, right? Why can't you have it in Canada or Mexico or Argentina, or even out of India, right? So I think the question to ask is, instead of indexing towards hiring that head of sales, etc., can depending on the market segment. If you're in the enterprise segment, obviously you have no choice. But if you're in the SMB segment or in the upper segment, where you're driven more through marketing or product led, then is the sales team really required? So I would say, yeah, start with the referrals from investors, etc. Second is use talent partners or individual recruiting leads who specialized. The third thing is to question yourself: is it really required, or can you get a bit more further by leading sales yourself, right? These are three dimensions.
And then in terms of the persona itself, what are the right personas? And of course, I mean, it is contextual, but typically in B2B SaaS, right? Like that first sales leader, do you want that person to come in with a Rolodex? Do you want this person to be more of an athlete who has done and worked in other similar staged startups? Do you want this person to be kind of an ex-founder? Do you want this, is there an age element to it, an energy element to it? Even like in terms of like in a US-India corridor, you're also working with like a remote team, right? Like a lot of your
Yeah.
functional counterparts probably will be in India, in Chennai or Bangalore, right?
Yes.
So there's those cultural elements that come in. So how should US India B2B SaaS founders think about the persona for
Yeah.
that first sales hire in the US?
Fantastic question, Samitra. I think the way to think about is, if you are pre-product market fit, like under 1 million, right? I would get a founding AE and collaborate with him, right?
Hmm.
Sitting next to him. But if you are already north of 1 million and you see stronger signals for product market fit, then I would go ahead and hire a head of sales. Head of sales. I would not call the gentleman VP of sales or director of sales. I would just call him head of sales, even north of one, and see how that individual scales to be a VP, or would he be stuck at a director or an AE, right? I've seen all kinds of those individuals play out, right? So under one, get a founding AE, sit next to him, but above one, stronger product market fit, you're in this 1 to 5, get a person as head of sales, or even you can call him a VP of sales if you really want to get that guy on board, and give him that leeway to be able to build that stage from 1 to 5.
Yeah. And then would you index on prior startup work experience for this kind of a post 1 million, or would you be okay with somebody even coming out of, let's say, a customer persona that you intend to serve?
Yeah, I would strongly index for someone with a startup background, because even at that stage, it's still very tactical, very tactical on a day-to-day basis. So I would definitely look for someone who has gone through the similar phase at a similar startup, right? In the past. So I would strongly recommend startup experience. I think what many people misunderstand is when someone comes from the customer side, they can be a great champion or an advocate. Let's say somebody comes from Visa and say, I would love to join, I would like to drive sales. I have my reservations there because one, cultural fit is would be a challenge. Second is the stage fit. They have never seen a stage, and also I think when I look for leaders like this, always think about both the culture and the stage fit.
So this is amazing. Final kind of stage, which is, and I think this really lends itself well to your particular experience. So
Mm,
5 to 20 million ARR, you
mm,
are, let's say, 5 to 7 years in, the company is doing well, but then now you're kind of getting to that point where, hey, do you need to create an exit for your early angels or early kind of seed investors? Maybe the team is looking for liquidity, right? So you start thinking about, hey, a potential exit. Now, I think in most US India SaaS founders are not, I mean, they don't come from a finance background. They've not kind of worked in corp dev or M&A or anything, right? So you are kind of, you're learning everything
yes.
through the go, right? Now, let's say even to create an exit event 24 months down the road,
Yeah.
right? What can these founders start doing today in terms of, short term, medium term things to
Yeah.
really even create an opportunity at the right time to get an exit, right? And I know this is perfect for you. You have been part of 7 SaaS acquisitions, right?
I think I strongly urge founders to think day zero, who is a potential partner or an acquirer for your business. It might sound very counterintuitive, but I think you should think about it from day zero, right? Because that means that, day zero, you're keeping optionality at the table, right? So I think very, very important thing is to, even before starting the company, to think about who are these potential acquirers and is there even acquirers in this space. If you want to build a large independent company that's creating a completely new category, that's also perfectly fine. But even in that world, I think you should know whom you will potentially partner, right? May not be for acquisition, but potentially partner, right? So I would strongly urge, and if you need some help, you can ask people who, I'm sure, we're standing on the shoulders of so many giants who has sold so many categories of software over the last 30 years, right? Look at the number of storage companies that got sold, probably 3,000 of them in the last 30 years, right? So there are a lot of people who have done it already. Second is I strongly urge everyone to build proactive relationships. Don't be reactive, build proactive relationships with your acquirers, with all your competitor CEOs. So one of the things that I carry myself is with every company that I have built, all the companies in that space whom we compete directly in the marketplace, I'm also great friends with them, personally great friends with them, because you never know what kind of event might manifest that you might have to partner together, right? Even though you're competing in the marketplace today, right? So I would say proactively build relationships with acquirers, your competitor CEOs, CXOs, etc., etc. I think the last thing is if you have taken capital, right? I think you have a very strong fiduciary responsibility to all stakeholders, right? Whether it is investors, employees, everyone. And I think, to be honest, everyone will have different time scales, right? Your investor have a time scale because he has a fund, right? Your employee is waiting on the 4-year vesting to go find, another life adventure, right? I think everyone will have different time scales. You also have a different time scale, and you should be comfortable that you have a fiduciary responsibility. Everyone will have different stakeholders, but thankfully there are multiple options, right? Whether they are secondary marketplaces like CartaX or Equityzen or something. Optionality is the word that I keep using multiple times. As a founder, your number one job is to have optionality at the table. Sometimes that optionality is the ability to shut down quickly. Sometimes it's the optionality to raise. Sometimes it's the optionality to exit. Sometimes it's optionality to stay alive because some stakeholders, whether you're co-founder or wants to leave. So yeah, I think that's how it comes down to, right?
And I think all the things you mentioned, right? The kind of baseline skill set seems to be a really good proactive relationship builder, right? And kind of a long-term relationship builder. And this is kind of a personal question I have, right? I mean, you having just seen you for so many years now, you don't come across as the most extrovert, person who's kind of out there and being in every party and being kind of on a yacht after the conference and all that, right? But you have actually built very solid relationships in your industries across companies. You've created all these exits deals. I mean, I know work with a bunch of private equity folks. What is that nuance, right? It almost seems, at least to me as a friend, more like a counterintuitive to your kind of personality, but you still do it really well.
Yeah, yeah. I think one thing is I stay extremely focused on the outcome that I want to drive for that business in that current situation, right? So right now I'm running Beamer and Userflow, right?
Yeah.
I exactly know like who are the potential lay of the land in terms of partners or acquirers or even investors for that matter, right? While publicly I might not state, but privately I'm working behind the scenes to create all of that relationships and getting that visibility and having those conversations transparently about everything, right? See, for me, I'm always working on that because I want to keep optionality at the table, right? As I said, optionality to raise, optionality to exit, optionality to shut down or change the course, because this is never a linear line, right? Like, I also keep changing my mind, which is good in a way, because if you're changing your mind at some level, I think you're also learning new things. I think for me, the biggest lesson is how do you stay very impatient in the short term, but stay very patient in the long term, right? Honestly, I struggled to get to that realization. It took me almost 2 decades, but I was a very impatient guy. I'll be very honest, right? So I was a very impatient guy, or else I would not just wait for something to happen. I would go ahead and execute. I think for the biggest founders I have seen success, staying really patient for the long term, but staying very impatient in the short term. So I think that balance is very very important if you want to build long term value creation companies. That's why I said you have the fiduciary responsibility to all stakeholders, including yourself. And even if the plans don't pan out, that's okay. I would just move past quickly and figure out something else. I think honestly, sometimes I also bet myself too much, and then I realize there's no point in beating myself so much, right? You just have to move on, because nobody cares. Even your better half doesn't care. Mostly, right? You got into this shit yourself. So I think you just move on, right? I started to learn that action produces more data, and data will help you, think and learn better. So you can sit, reflect, all of that. But I think if you also act, you get more data, good or bad.
No, this is great. I think really, speaking from the heart here. So a great closeout point. This has been a great conversation, Satya. I think the biggest takeaways I'm sort of I've heard in this, and hopefully a lot of the US India corridor SaaS founders will take away, is kind of this mindset, right? Which is a very kind of hardworking in the trenches mindset, trying to figure business problems out. I think second is combining that with also a growth mindset, right? Which is, hey, things that go contrary to your personality or things that need to still get done, or operating in the US, which might be a new market for you, meeting current customers, partners, putting yourself out there, right? Like many things which are probably not natural to a lot of people, especially with the classic persona that we see in the SaaS space. Um, you can still kind of do it, right? If you have that focus and you have that drive, right? And I think third is, I think it's almost like an extension of the whole optionality point that you mentioned. It's kind of having that grit, that persistence, right? It's a long runway, long journey. We need to have many shots at goal. So you have to almost take those things in your stride and kind of keep moving on, right?
Yeah.
And I think that point, what you said, I think probably Nawal also said it at some point, which is kind of be very very impatient in the short term, but extremely patient in the long term. I think that, to me, I think captures the gist of this all.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I also want to say is the market is very, very, very big. I think everyone have their hay in the sun. I think it's just that you would have to figure it out, especially in B2B SaaS markets. Consumer might be different. In B2B SaaS markets, I think you'll always find a way to help businesses with some problem and make money. I was just messaging a founder yesterday that I just saw their new website, and I'm like, oh, I think this pivot is the perfect pivot, and it took them 36 months. But this is perfect, right? Your time has come right now, so be quite happy that your time has come, and make hay when the sun shines. So this is a perfect time. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Satya, for sharing all these learnings and your life stories and speaking from the heart.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking time, Soumitra. I'm glad that we are able to get together. As I said, my keen intent is to pay it forward. I think that's how a lot of people have helped me. If I could be of any help to any of your investee companies or other founders, very glad to do that. Yeah, thank you so much.